Hello and welcome to Getting More Women in the Room. I'm Philippa Colley-Cousins, Commissioner at UK TV. Storytelling is quite simply the bedrock of life, and life, like the Japanese film Rashomon, can be seen from many perspectives. My view won't be the same as yours, or yours, or yours. So it stands to reason that drama needs to be written by the many and not the few. 1,000 Films, who sponsor this session, will be presenting a prize to the winner of their female scriptwriting competition over a free drink downstairs. So I hope you'll join us afterwards to network. But let's get down to it. I'm pleased to have some of the brightest and some swearers on the panel to speak their minds. Get frank together, have the conversation. So let's start by looking at some findings by the Writers Guild of Great Britain.
Hi, my name is Lisa Holdsworth. I'm the chair of the WGGB, also known as the Writers Guild of Great Britain, and I was involved in the commissioning and then the dissemination of the dreaded report that those statistics come from. And I'd like to get my very illustrious panel to introduce themselves to you as well. We've got some of the great and good here. Do you want to start, Nicola?
Yeah, I'm Nicola Shindler. I'm the executive producer at Red Production Company.
Esther Springer, executive producer, BBC Studios Drama.
I'm KIRSTIE SWAIN. I'm a screenwriter, and I wrote Pure, which was on Channel 4.
Whoop, whoop.
I'm AMBREEN RAZIA. I'm an actress and writer.
Whoop.
SASKIA Schuster, head of comedy at ITV, so I commission scripted comedy, comedy drama, and comedy entertainment.
Whoop, whoop.
Quite a whoop, but hey, I'll take it.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. I'm going to start off by asking a simple question. It's a year ago since those statistics came out in the report that the Guild did. You might have only just seen them then, but I'm going to ask each of our panellists what your reaction was when you heard those statistics, and I'll start with Saskia.
I wasn't remotely surprised. It was something that I'd been aware of. Before I was at ITV, I worked at Sky with Lucy Lumsden, and it was something that we really focused on, was trying to... it's probably more about female representation on screen and creating really interesting female characters, and hoping that, by doing that, that female writing would sort of ensue. When I went to ITV, despite putting out a pitch for producers to bring me sort of scripts by women and really good, interesting female characters, I wasn't being pitched. And that was after years of sort of putting that out. So no, it didn't surprise me at all.
AMBREEN?
Yeah, no, not surprised at all. Being an actress as well, I get loads of scripts in, comedy scripts and stuff that's been commissioned. And quite often, yeah, it's just, you can tell it's very male-dominated, the scripts. So yeah, no, not surprising.
I'm glad it was a funny animation. So depressing. I'm not surprised. When the report came out, I was surprised because, well, I suppose coming at it from a subjective point of view, I was one of the minority, like, making a show. And then I was looking around at all my friends not getting jobs, and yeah, I was surprised at the time, but I'm not. It's like, I was going to wear a red dress today, and I didn't, because it was like Handmaid's Tale dress, but I should have.
I've got Handmaid's Tale
Gilead.
earrings in.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm
Under his eye.
I'm in grey, so it's a bit like, ooh. Funny enough, I was a bit shocked at that. I was shocked at the fact that over the 10 years, it's kind of stayed the same, so there must be an assumption that everything was all right. Mm-hmm. And so everyone will just keep on doing what they have been doing.
Yeah.
And nobody really needs to do any more. So I was shocked because I thought we were doing a bit more. I thought we were, but those statistics say no, and that's what's surprising to me, is that there's this line and it's, we can, that's all right, we'll carry on doing that, and that's good enough. Yeah. And it's obviously not good enough. No.
I was not surprised with the report specifically, because about a couple of years ago, we started to look at it within Red ourselves, and Caroline Hollick, who was then creative director, who's now at Channel 4, had kind of said our development slate was probably 60-40, male or female, but she was looking back over the number of series that had been greenlit that were initiated by women, and we were at that point hugely surprised because there were so few. Yeah. But then, so at that point, but that was about 2 or 3 years ago, just before people kind of started saying it more formally. So then we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we were more than equal, because you have to overcompensate, I think, in order to create equality.
Just to give you a bit of background from the Guild's point of view, it came from exactly that comment. Oh, it's getting better, it's getting better. And it being saying almost as a mantra, it is getting better. And that was also being said of BAME writers as well, and writers with disability. And we commissioned, it was an entirely independent report written by 2 male academics, but you can't have everything. And to be honest with you, I was a bit nervous when we knew the report was coming in, because it might have said exactly that. We might have been banging a drum that didn't need banging. But we sat down to proofread the 174-page report, which is on our website if anybody wants to read it from the soup to the nuts. Nuts is probably not the right word. And with every turn of the page, those of us who were proofreading it got a little bit angrier, I think, and a little bit more frustrated. And 3 months before the report was released, some women wrote to broadcast an open letter saying, why aren't you commissioning? It was particularly targeted at ITV. And through back channels, we'd had quite a few commissioners, previous BBC and ITV commissioners, come to us and go, I'm really hurt by this. Oh. I know that I did everything I possibly could to make sure more women were commissioned. And by then I'd read the report, so I knew it wasn't true, but it was embargoed and I couldn't go, you liar. So it's been an interesting year in the aftermath of that. What do you think the reasons are for that terrible gender split? Are they structural? Is it the writer's fault? Is it the BBC's fault? Is it Boris Johnson's fault? Everything else is? What's your reaction to that? I'll start with Nicola.
It's very hard to say, and also because I work very specifically in my own company where we make our own rules, where 23 out of 25 people who work there are women. So it feels like in our bubble, it feels like everything's okay. So it's when you look outside that you realise it isn't okay. I think, you know, we're working backwards from a time when less women were in this industry and less women were commissioning and less women were certainly submitting writing ideas. So it takes time. Yeah. But what is shocking is that it has, over the last 10 years, nothing's changed. So I don't think there's a conspiracy. I don't think there's, you know, a determined group of people trying to keep women's voices out. I think that there's a history of the way drama's commissioned, which might be not great for female writers. I think the way some productions are run makes it quite hard for women to stay on production if they're looking at, you know, I don't mean having children stops you writing. Please don't shout at me. What I mean is it's sometimes quite hard to remain at the centre of a production when you're doing other things as well. I think there's a number of different reasons, and I think also nobody has been shouting enough, and now that you're shouting, but not just you, then we have to edit ourselves. So now we have to make sure our lists are not 50-50, our lists are predominantly female writers, to look at them first to see whether this programme that we're making would work for them. I think we have to be much more proactive.
I agree with that. And I also think it's, there's some, because of the enormous pressures that making television puts on everybody, there's a tendency to say, well, we're going to work with people who've done it before, who know how to do it, who can do it quickly. You don't have to have too many conversations. Even if budgets are going down and schedules are getting tighter, it's like, well, no, we're going to have this one and this one and this one. And that's not just with writing, that's just across the board. And it's how can we think about how we structure working with writers as well as directors and producers and crew, so that more women are able to participate.
Absolutely.
And don't feel, you know, if you've gone off to have a baby or if there's other things in your life, that when you come back you've got to, you know, feel like you're at ground zero again. And I think that's one of the things that, I mean, anecdotally, in speaking to women friends, I felt, you know, I had a kid and I had my baby and I didn't write a script for a year, or I did write, but, you know, suddenly, you know, I feel like I'm starting all over again.
One of the meetings we had after the report with your high-ups, which is embargoed, so I can't say who the high-ups were, one of the things that they asked us, well, what can we practically do? And we said, well, one of the things you could institute tomorrow is stop dropping notes on people on a Friday to turn over a script by Monday. Because if you are, and this is true for men as well as women, if you are a parent, a carer, you have responsibilities outside of writing, it really fucks your weekend up, frankly, and fucks your life up. And we did have someone in that room go, yeah, it really annoys me when they send me tapes to watch at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. Yes! So that...
It's hard, you know, that is difficult, but I think, again, the rigours of production, because there's so much more demand for programmes, for content. So it should be a time when more women, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic writers, disability, working class writers, that, you know, now should be a boom time for all of us to make sure we've got writers on our slates and we're paying them the money. That's the other thing. Pay a writer to write. And that should happen. I think that's the rigours of production. It's really hard for like a script team, you know, somebody has said, send them that tape, send them that note. And it's just, oh, fucking hell, it's 7 o'clock and they've just got home and she's just putting the babies to bed and it's just like, no, send them the, you know, it's you're a little script editor, it's really hard not to.
Yeah. And from a writer's point of view, what do you think the reason is for this?
It's definitely the patriarchy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think someone should get around to smashing it, frankly.
And I think as well, it's like a societal thing. I think we've been conditioned to think that, like, I don't know, societally, I think there are a lot of white cis men in positions of power commissioning shows, and like I've not had a problem getting scripts commissioned and things like that, but I've had a problem getting things
made,
greenlit. And I don't know, I think we need more women, more minorities, more working class, more regional people in those positions of power, because it's hard to kind of step outside your own taste box. I reckon that's what makes a good commissioner, being able to do that. And the more people of diversity that we have in those roles, the more diverse stories we'll get.
Yeah, and the more sympathetic, I guess, they are to those narratives in a way, because all we can do is write the characters, is write those female-driven narratives. You know, we're not in the rooms when things get greenlit. So it's, you know, it's really, really difficult for us. But you know, so if we, you know, I know that I write for women all the time, but if I don't, you know, I come from an angle where, you know, I feel like this is great because it's, you know, a panel of, you know, about women and statistics, but I feel like I'm fighting another battle, and that's women of colour. And so sometimes I focus very heavily on that narrative and forget about women in general, which is, you know, unfortunately sometimes I do that, but I feel like, if there are more women and women of colour, women of different classes higher up, then I think you're right.
The Guild were asked why we didn't, when we commissioned this report, why we didn't also then focus on anything. The actual truth was getting hold of the statistics was incredibly hard, and you can extrapolate whether a writer is male or female first from their name and then doing a bit of an IMDb search and looking at a photograph of them. It's not perfect, but that's how we worked out. It's much more difficult to find out whether someone is Black, Asian or minority ethnicity, has a disability or is LGBTQ. And it's something that we added to our list of demands, and they are demands because we're a trade union, is better monitoring of equality of those statistics so that we don't have to find the money for a report like that. But I think you're absolutely right, it needs to be intersectional. Now, Saskia, when you saw the report, instead of sitting here and moaning like the rest of us, you actually went and did something about it. Would you like to tell everybody what you've been working on for the last year at ITV?
Yeah, so I started by sort of thinking, well, you know, it's quite easy to say I can't commission something if I've not been pitched it. But I was thinking, well, why am I not being pitched more? So I went to ERA, Equal Representation for Actresses. They did an amazing event at BAFTA, which was full of equally horrific statistics. And I spent months and months talking to loads of people, writers, producers, performers, all sorts of people, just sort of asking about their experiences and what they thought the problems were. And some of the things that sort of came back to me were that, first of all, comedy has sort of, you've got a lot of writer performers, and the world of stand-up has long-standing been male-dominated. It's getting a lot better. I think I heard a statistic that this year at the Fringe, I think close to 40% of stand-ups are female, which is brilliant. So that sort of, I think, created a long-standing culture of comedy, particularly being quite male. Then female writers just sort of finding that they couldn't create the relationships with producers, that they weren't able to compete with male writers who had accumulated a much longer list of writing credits, just because the industry was sort of much more male skewing. So tended to have quite a small sort of network of producers, not necessarily the right producers for their projects, so not getting their projects up to the place that they wanted to take it, or being steered editorially in a direction that they didn't feel was best for their writing. There are a lot of issues. There are also confidence issues, all sorts of things. So the first thing I did, and it's sort of as Nicola says, to get to 50-50, you sort of have to overcompensate, sort of have to oversteer the ship in one direction to readjust to the middle. So I did change my terms of commissioning. And I said for comedy entertainment, I won't commission all male writing teams. There do have to be women on the writing teams, and I do have sign-off of the writing teams to make sure that that's happening. And then for scripted comedy, and again, I'm very wary about this becoming anti-men and male bashing and very sort of angry and unnuanced. I don't think that's helpful. I think this is about inclusivity. So what I've said for scripted comedy, where there are a lot of sort of male writing teams, writing partnerships, the production must demonstrate best endeavours to bring females into the writing room. And my next commission, which I don't think I'm quite allowed to talk about yet, but I'll talk in vague terms. It is from a male writing team, and they are paying a female writer who has theatre experience to shadow them across the course of an episode, right from sort of early writing meetings right through to the edit, to help her sort of start a career in TV. Now, that is still male written, but it is progressing a female career as well. So yeah, I set up this thing called Comedy 50-50. There's been a lot of negative press about it, but it's slightly more nuanced than maybe the initial reporting suggested.
I mean, haven't you wiped up the Likely Lads, everything else off the comedy thing?
Yeah.
Because now
I've banned men.
Only comedy written by women is allowed. Well, thanks for that. Last question before we show you another film. Do you think that looking at the last 10 years and looking at how television has been set up, we've lost talent over those years? Do you think there are voices that we could do with now that have gone into the ether because we haven't?
It's really hard to say. I mean, as a company, we've always had an open door policy that we read absolutely everything that comes to us, and that we get back to everyone who comes to us, regardless of gender, regardless of anything. So that's easy. I think I presume that some people. I always like to think that really good scripts get made, and I don't know whether that's true, but we've sometimes had scripts that have been 5 years, 7 years in development, and then they get made because the right person at the right time and the right commissioner at the right time. And I found my experience is that as many male commissioners have commissioned women as the, I don't think it's about not having male commissioners. I think it's more fundamental than that. I think it's about us saying, for example, we won't now have a list. We live off lists, list of directors, list of writers, whatever. We will now never, ever have a male-dominated list. But 5 years ago, as a totally female-run company, we would have had that. So it's we're slowly changing things, and it will, this conversation's happening, things are changing.
So I think, I suppose for Black and Asian writers, the danger is that, if there are richer pickings in LA, and they can get into rooms, women writers can get into rooms in LA. I know 3 who have worked here but couldn't really progress their careers and have done fantastically well in writers' rooms on all sorts of shows. So that's the danger, that we lose the talent that we have here. We don't nurture that talent. We don't find ways in which we can make the shows that the scripts that they've written, thinking maybe a bit more outside the box in what we can do to get things actually made, that give those writers a profile and a reason to stay.
Do you think there's an issue also with if you can't see someone who is like you, whether it's gender or race or disability, out there doing it, that you feel that path is blocked to you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's having, you know, like just with the session this morning with Russell T Davis and with you, Nicola, and that you know, for young gay guys and well, also everybody watching Queer as Folk, just to see that show and to see that on the television, it's like, yes, that's my story, that's our story. It's not just, you know, it's everybody's story, and we can all be part of that. And it's so important that those stories, all different types of stories, are told from the point of view of people who have a particular experience. And I think that I do worry that, you know, there is potential of losing talent if there are opportunities in other places that we aren't giving those people, especially the women.
It is, yeah, it's really hard to say, isn't it? And I think that childcare and having kids must have a lot to do with it, because if it's hard enough at the start already and then you have a family, then how are you going to break back in? It's hard enough to break in the first time. I don't have kids. I probably should have had kids, because now I'm going to be a geriatric mother if I ever do. But if I had had kids, I would have been with like the sociopathic man I was with. That's good, actually. But yeah, I think you need to make provision for that, and like to nurture writers and nurture new writers and writers who are parents as well. And it's all tied up in it. And I think I've been hearing about an actress who won't work on a set that doesn't have a creche. And I think that should be standard, because why should you be penalised for, like, men? Everyone has been had, like a woman had you. That's why everyone's been had. So you need to, you need to support women and for them to have families. And like, I feel like my scripts are my children. No one tells you how hard it's going to be to like make a show and then you forget and then do it again. But that's, yeah, you need to support them.
It's really interesting. One time I worked with a female writer but she was strong she was adamant about this, and it really pissed off the producers. So she would write, once she'd taken the boys to school, she'd come back and she'd write. She would stop writing at 3 and she'd pick the boys up, and then she'd spend time with the boys and she'd start writing again at 7:30. And when we were in production, I mean, yeah, that didn't go down well, but she stuck to her guns. She absolutely stuck to her guns. That's it. So
a bit more, maybe those are further lads standing up for ourselves. About yourself, AMBREEN.
I think I can only speak from a writing perspective, really, but you know, I'm working with young people as well, you know, not just people in the industry, but, you know, people who are, I don't know, who have been in care or the UK prison system or whatever it might be, and just seeing yourself reflected back for anyone is just so important. You know, it's not only about, you know, evoking a change within the industry, but in society itself. And I think it's important that everyone sees themselves reflected back. I also think that, you know, you're told to keep things as specific as possible. You know, if you're writing about a place or you're writing about certain characters, keep it really specific. And if people get it, they get it. And if they don't, they don't. And I love that. But then also, I've always grown up in London, which is, you know, essentially a melting pot of, you know, incredible, amazing cultures. And in a way, like when I went on tour the first time with Diary of a Hounslow Girl on a national tour around the UK, you know, it was on the cusp of Brexit, and I was in places like Lyme Regis talking about RISLA on stage, and people were like, I don't know what this is, you know. So it's like, I don't know, it was like, it's really interesting. It's like you want to cater for everyone, but then it's like, it's weird. It's like the broadcasters also are kind of looking at an overall, you know, the UK as an overall thing. And I think sometimes I just live in London, in this London bubble, and want to reflect London. So maybe
they keep
there's
telling you to write what you know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, yeah.
With that tattooed on the inside of my eyelid one day. Saskia, do you think we've lost funny women over the years? Do you think it's reinforced the idea that women aren't bloody funny?
I think, comedy's really hard from lots of levels. I mean, comedy I've always thought is slightly the unloved genre. It's underfunded, I think. I don't think there are nearly enough comedy slots. It's perceived as high risk. It's so subjective. So it's really, really tough. And I think then I think a lot of people give up with comedy, whether they're male or female. But I think, if you're a female and you're taking on that extra fight of fighting that sort of male-dominated culture and the whole, oh my goodness, I still hear it so much, women aren't funny. It doesn't take that much more to just make you give up. So I'm sure we have. But then I think we've probably lost some amazing male talent as well, just because it's a tough fight. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you all a question. I want you to answer it honestly and from your very soul. Does it matter if only middle-aged, cis, white men are writing our drama and comedy? Really?
It's a quite easy answer. Yes. Of course it matters. It matters. It's not just about representation. It matters that we get all sorts of voices on screen. There's lots of brilliant people who come from different places. They should all be heard. The best scripts should get on television, and I refuse to believe that those are only written by that group of people.
Yes.
Yeah, what she said.
It's quite straightforward, really.
Yeah. Oh, we've another half hour to go.
Yes, because I need something else to binge watch, and I've run out of...
And a job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's true. It's about having a whole diverse range of stories, of different experiences that are reflected on the screen. And one of the things that you said in that report, well, in that clip there, about how women writers in film, their films earn more money.
Better.
And it was just like when Empire was on FX and everyone was like, oh my God, this drama with all these black people, that's really popular. And then, Black Panther's like, oh, it's really popular. And Get Out makes like, I don't know, $100 million in, I don't know, a week or something. And it's interesting how the financial benefits of opening out the palette more to different voices, different experiences, and reflecting that, there's a commercial imperative that can come back. I think that's...
Do you feel like it's a battle with... It was interesting that obviously there's a lot of Sally Wainwrights writing there, and so there should be, because if they just dedicated a channel to her, that'd be absolutely fine with me. But it feels like over and over again we have to fight the battle. So Sally writes something, everyone goes, oh, women are interesting, aren't they? Yes, here's some pictures with women in, and then Sally has to write another thing to remind us. I'm going to say something very bitchy now. I'm surprised there wasn't a Fleabag clip on there. I hope that one day all women writers are famous enough that when they say in an interview, I think I might write a film, it's headline news as it was earlier this week. But that constant, we've broken through, but actually it's just one writer. I think a lot of writers are finding that quite frustrating, and
that's why that line that stayed at the same level for 10 years, because it was Linda LaPlante from before,
Kay Mellor.
And Kay Mellor.
I don't think it is just one writer, though. I do think, like, Sally's been very prominent, and quite rightly, and that's brilliant. But I, having worked with her, have a lot of people more female writers come to us now saying, oh, we've seen Happy Valley, we've seen this, here's our scripts, and then we have the material that we can then give that to commissioners and give that to broadcasters. And I do think it's really important to keep emphasising there's never been, and I've been doing this for 20 years, there's never been a moment where someone said we don't want female voices. There's never been a commissioner who hasn't said we are open to female writers or who's doing something about it. So I think you're right as well when someone said about confidence. I do think we should look at what the fact would be interesting to know how many submissions there are from female writers compared to male writers, and if there's something we can do to encourage women at an earlier age and at a younger level to say writing's a job and you can be a writer and this is how you're a writer, so that the material's coming up to us. Because I just think it's really... I don't believe, but I mean, you're a writer, you've got a different experience. I don't believe there's people up there saying no female writers, no female voices. I do think that most people will go for the best script that they're given and the best project they're given.
So one of the things, sorry, leaping in here, one of the things that I sort of uncovered when I was doing my extensive research was that a lot of producers would say to me, but I don't know many female writers. So for comedy entertainment example, most producers could probably name about 5 females that they'd have in the writing room. And they say there aren't many, or acknowledge that there are, but I don't know how to find them. So one of the things I did immediately was to create a database of female writers. And we've got over 500 on there, and that is for scripted and non-scripted. But also at our Comedy 50/50 events, we have sort of enforced networking. So I make producers have 3 10-minute meetings with writers, just to kind of start the conversation, really. And we've done it recently for unrepresented writers with agents as well. And I think it is just broadening that whole network. And it's quite hard, I think, for a writer to do that on their own and to even, get the producer to respond, because producers are busy people as well. And, it just helps having that sort of, that introduction, I think, made for you.
Do you think agents have something that came back to the Guild from some people in the know, some commissioners, was I'm looking at, he specifically looked at my agent and said, well, there's not a 50/50 split at your agency. Do you think agents need to be braver in signing up not just female talent, but BAME talent and writers with disabilities, etc., and not see them as a risk?
We've recently, because our last event was a focus on agents, I've had a lot of agents come up to me and sort of say, I've been looking at my client list and I'm really aware that actually it's a very narrow focus. So I think, it sometimes just takes it to be pointed out to you, doesn't it? Like your report, that was a big wake-up call, and I think most people were not surprised, and yet we hadn't really done anything about it. So I do think sometimes it isn't necessarily a sort of willful ignoring, but just, you're carrying on with 3 billion things, and suddenly, you need something brought to your attention to actually act on it.
And then you do make changes. So that's why thank you for doing that report. It makes a massive difference. And we'd sit there then suddenly and we will not look at a list that doesn't have women, or Philippa and I have just made a programme written by a woman, 6 hours written by a woman, where we made sure we had a female director list. It's across the board, really. Yeah. And we tried to make every department reflect that, not because we didn't want men on it, and there was, in the end, you end up with probably, again, 60-40 women. You don't end up with 100% women. But it's just being made, just being prodded to think about things, I think, really helps. Because you're desperately trying to get commissions and you're desperately trying to get work and you're answering to business people. There's a lot of pressure, but it takes outside people to say stop and look at what you're doing and make sure your behaviour is helping the situation.
And once you do that, once you do that, you keep doing it.
Yeah, you do keep doing it, always.
And so it becomes a habit, so that your point of view shifts, and that you by degree, if you are commissioning more scripts by women, so you're over-commissioning that area, then you kind of then see what you're working with, and it should become second nature.
I'm going to give the last word, because we'll open it out to questions. I've got a couple of questions on the iPad, but I'm going to give the last word to the writers. What do you think we can do better to put ourselves out there?
Okay, well, as a writer, I'm showrunning my next show, which I'm not allowed to say much about, but it pisses me off when producers say they can't find female writers because we've got so many to choose from. We've got like a top list and then another list and another list, and you just have to phone up an agent and ask them. Surprise, surprise. There are loads of female writers in this room, probably. There's one in my house as well. Like, my housemate's a writer. It's like, including me.
You get rent killing for that,
I think you just have to, we have to keep writing our stories and keep pushing and don't give up, because it is soul destroying. I remember just like thinking, am I a writer? I was scared to say I was a writer for years when I was a writer. And looking back, I want to go back and shake myself and say, you are a writer, you're writing a script. You're doing more than a lot of people do, which is like finish a script and send it off. I think we just need to keep writing and keep fighting and don't wait for people to give you permission. And I think, we just need to keep fighting and write stories about women, because I feel like, I want to hear different stories from men. I want to hear what's the word? Confessional stories from men. I feel like we've seen like thrillers and police dramas. I want to hear that from them, and I want to see like thrillers from women and moving into the genre stuff, science fiction.
I think it's just transparency. I want to know why it's not got through the door. I want to know why it hasn't moved beyond that point and why it hasn't moved beyond the point after that, and exactly why. It's not going to offend me if, you know, it's like, Dorset don't like it, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever it might be. It's just like it's just not palatable. I know, it's just not palatable, or whatever it is. Just tell me, and I'll deal with it. But as long as I know what the reality is, and it's important to know, you know, being a creative and being a writer and being in my own head most of the time, I think it is important to have an awareness of and awareness of the architecture and the infrastructure that I work in above me, and so I'd like just total transparency about where my script is at what stage, and yeah.
I think the tip I'd give writers in the room is there's no stupid questions. Don't sit there biting your tongue thinking, I don't understand what was meant by this, I don't understand how it all works. Just ask, because people love talking about their jobs and the sound of their own voices, so you'll be absolutely fine. Whilst I was getting ready for this session, someone who came up to me, doesn't want to be named, she's a female writer, and she gave me a bit of a story that I want to tell before I open it out to questions. She's in a writing group with 6 other writers, I believe. She's the only woman in the writing group, and they set a task to themselves to write to development executives, producers, etc. Not necessarily asking for their script to be read, but to come in, can I come in for a chat? Can I talk to you about my career? The sort of thing that you do at the start of your career. Her male counterparts sent between 80 and 120 emails and got around 15 people who said, yeah, come in. She sent 1,500 emails and only got 15 people saying she'd come in. They were all women who invited her in for a chat. None of the men she wrote to got back to her. Now, I'm not saying it because is it because she is a woman? But correlation isn't causation, but I found that really interesting, and I'd like to thank her for telling me that story. She's asked not to be named, but I wonder if people in this room need to have a look at who's writing to them and asking to come in for a chat, and maybe if you go home and we all join hands and sing Kumbaya and you invite one woman in to your office for a chat, that would be lovely. And the other thing I'd say to commissioners, and I hope Kirstie and AMBREEN agree with me, I'd rather have a fast and brutal no than 5 years of maybe. Yeah. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to start with one I've got on the iPad for our panel. Is part of the issue the overall risk aversion of commissioners? High-end TV wants the same 10 names, is that true? Most of whom are men. Until they risk new talent, it won't change. Do you agree with that? That's a statement more than a question.
No, that's not my experience. No, my experience is right now it feels the opposite of that, interestingly, which is everyone wants the next thing that's edgy and interesting and hasn't been done before, and so if that comes from a new writer, then I've found people are open to that. I think there's ways of placing support around writers now that mean that you can get series with less experience. The difference between now and 10 years ago is that there aren't the long-running series where people come in and do an episode and then go off. But now there's a world of writers' rooms, which didn't exist in the UK even 3 years ago. And I think writers' rooms are really helping people come into the industry and get the experience. And from my experience is that commissioners want risk right now. It's the opposite.
It's good to hear.
I do agree. I think the desire's there. I think it's what gets commissioned and then what gets commissioned after that. I think the support structures you put around the talent is important, especially if they're newer. How are they supported so that they can tell the story rather than, feel like I've tried but I just can't, I'll never be able to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think, sex education's a good example. Yeah. And the storytelling in that is incredibly sophisticated. And I despite the report and the findings, I do remain positive, and I think that it is a good time. Mm. So,
do you think I'm asking you directly now, that's not fair, but do you think you're risk averse at ITV?
I think there are, for comedy, there are always certain things that are going to be in place. I have 2 channels that I commission for and very specific audiences that we are sort of targeting our programmes towards, and my job is to commission those shows that I feel are going to get an audience. So I have had to turn down a lot of scripts that I have loved but just don't feel are a fit for either channel. So, is that risk averse? I'm not prepared to risk a show that I know is not going to find an audience. But in terms of who I'm commissioning from, in the first instance, I try as far as possible to read blind, as it were. I don't like knowing who's written something. I don't like even knowing which production company it's come from, ideally, because I don't want to know who's going to be shouting at me when I turn it down. I think most of the things that I've got coming up are from new writers. But it's, as Nicola said, it's making sure there's support around them. So yes, I'm completely happy to commission from people who have got very little experience, but protecting from risk, it is putting experience around them. And I think that's to protect them as much as anything.
To the two writers, sorry to lump you together, do you feel that you can put things into commissioners now that maybe you wouldn't have in the past? Do you feel like kicking over the traces?
I feel like the scripts I'm writing just now are quite angry. Like one of them is called Man Killers. I love men. I'm in love with one, so it's okay. But yeah, I feel like because there are so many slots now, I feel like there are more opportunities for diverse stories. I think. But just going back to what we were saying before, one of my friends had this show that she was developing with a production company. It depends who you're working with. You need to nurture new writers and work with production companies that kind of support you. And this friend, she had this story that was really important to her. It was like her life story, basically. And she was told that they would take the idea from her and she wouldn't be allowed to write it. Like, she didn't even know if she would get an episode of her own show. So she ended up taking it away from them because, like, as a writer, your stories are your currency. They're your livelihood. So it's like they were probably going to give it to someone who'd done it before. I think that's maybe why the same names keep coming up. But you've got to take a risk, otherwise it will be the same names. I think, yeah, it's exciting there are so many slots now because they're going to need new people to kind of come in and fill them, but you've got to support them. And I think a good producer and a good script editor is so important because it's a hard job.
Absolutely.
My experience in watching comedy and being involved in, writing comedy for television is that, yes, there is more room for new writers now. I think that, things like This Country and People Just Do Nothing and experiences from people's own lives is something that seems to be very popular because there's an authenticity there and something really vibrant and exciting. I haven't approached drama as a in terms of writing, but it does to me from the outset feel a little bit elitist. But then I can't say from someone who's been on the inside, that's me on the outside watching Channel 4 going written by ... So I think I can only...
One of the stats that did come out, and I won't name, was that one particular male writer had written more drama on Channel 4 than women writers altogether over 10 years.
Yeah.
So just put that out there. I'm going to chuck it out to the audience. Be rude, be shocking, be horrifying. I'll start with the lady with the striped top on there.
Can you hear me? Hi. So I was chatting earlier with Freya, who's also a writer, and we were talking about this report that came out that said when a man gets a job application, if he can meet 30% of the criteria, he thinks, I'm qualified for that. Whereas the same woman who can meet 70% of the criteria won't apply because she doesn't feel that she's qualified. So great for men to have that confidence. And we mentioned, the confidence issues. And I'm looking at this panel, and you've got a panel there of women who've been very successful in whatever it is that they do. So I want to ask you for advice, specifically what women can say to themselves to be more confident. And that's less about staying in the industry and more about sort of getting into it.
There was a tweet that went viral yesterday that I thought was brilliant because I think writers particularly are susceptible to imposter syndrome. And certainly as a working class female writer, I am constantly waiting for the, oh, no, you do one. I will credit it was from a tweeter called Veronica Kaboom, if you want to find it. And she said, today was the day I realised that the only way to overcome imposter syndrome was to just own up to being an imposter. What up, bitches? I am a poltergeist made of lies. Choke on my mediocrity. I'm mad about it. And I think that's something which is, do you know what? You're going to feel it, and everybody's feeling it. It's a conversation that comes up a lot, that feeling of, this is not for me, I was never meant to be here. Something that I talk to much younger writers, sort of 18-year-olds with a scheme I'm organising in Bradford, is to tell them that, because people being told it's not a proper job and it's not for them and it's only for people who can fund their way through it, which is to a certain extent is true, but because a lot of people in Edinburgh on the Fringe this week there because of the bank of mum and dad, I'm sure. But this industry, this creative industry in this country, put £101 billion into the UK economy last year, and something like 1 in 11 jobs are in the creative industry in this country. It's more than fishing and agriculture and things like that. So it is a proper job, and everybody is entitled to be part of our industry. And I think just keeping those kind of statistics that you're not doing this as a favour, you're not doing it because you're a dilettante, you're doing it because it's what you're good at and what you're passionate about, I think is really important. Anybody else want to?
Confidence is hugely important, but it's also, and I think the way to keep yourself confident is to remember there's no right and wrong. We're not working in a place where there is a right answer and a wrong answer. Nobody knows anything. Not one person knows whether something's going to succeed or not. Nobody knows whether anyone's going to watch it or not. So you just go on your own instincts. So why aren't your instincts as valid as the next person's instincts? And so then it's the confidence to speak up in the room and say what you think. And I know some people are born confident and some people aren't, and some people have had confidence beaten out of them by early life. But I think that's the key thing, which is the confidence to say, this is what I feel. For me, this character does this because of these reasons, or I think it'd be better if the character did this. You're not wrong, because there's just a version of that script that would work that way, and you're never 100% right either. So no one knows anything is the most useful thing. And I stole that from William Goldman as well. So I'm really aware of that, but I've had it in my mind.
And that's just to agree with what Kirstie was saying. It's about finding people to work with in the industry who get what you're doing as a writer and can, if there is an issue with confidence, it's working with somebody who can spend a bit of time with you, go through the script with you, talk about what's working, what isn't working, and encourage you to write another script, and then encourage you to write another script after that, and to keep doing it, and so that you feel that this monolith, if it feels like that there at least is like a little way in. So it's finding somebody that you can have that dialogue with. And I think that's really important as well, because it's so collaborative. And then once you get a script commissioned, let alone having it made, it's then dozens of people, hundreds of people. So it's finding somebody who you can have conversations with that. So you don't go mad, basically. You don't feel, this isn't right, or 70%. That's shocking. I think that's horrible. But I can identify with it actually, really strongly. But yeah, so that's why I think you should keep writing and make those contacts. And so, like the 50-50 initiatives that SASKIA is doing, I think that's brilliant, and there should be more of that, like that enforced networking. I love that.
Sounds terrifying. Some wine in hand.
Oh yeah, no, plenty of wine.
It's not pitching, it's just hello.
Yeah, oh no, plenty of wine, and it's just, and also knowing the industry a bit, knowing who's doing what, like the BAFTA Elevate this year's, and the one from before, which was directors, I think, and this year's the BAFTA Elevate writers on that, they got around and about. There are some really fabulous women writers on that, and they got opportunities to meet commissioners, and they really took advantage of it. Good for them. And so it's finding out. It's being finding out what the industry is doing, who's doing what, who commissions what opportunities are available, and finding a place that you feel is simpatico with what you do and what you want to do.
When Pure was commissioned, I have imposter syndrome right now, like sitting here. And when Pure was greenlit, I was like, God, oh, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. And, well, obviously I was grateful because I got a show, but then you have to go, do you know what? I've fucking earned this. I've worked my arse off for years. And you just have to kind of own it. And I'm going to quote the great philosopher Whoopi Goldberg from Sister Act 2.
Nice. Yes.
So she said, I'm not going to sing, don't worry. She said that if you wake up in the morning and you think you're a singer, you're a singer. So the same goes for
truth.
writing. Yeah.
I'd say the same. I totally agree with what you were saying about no one knows anything. And I don't know what Kirstie knows, Kirstie doesn't know what I know, and everyone has, their own story to tell, or their own point of view, or their own opinions, or, whatever it might be. And I just think that we're all so unique, and I think it's important to embrace that. And I think this is an industry that does, in a way. You see it all over, especially in this particular city we're in now. There's so much incredible work, at the Fringe and things like that, where you're like, wow, I never would have come at like that angle, the way that artist has come at something. It's breathtaking, but I could never have seen. So embrace how weird and wonderful and unique you are, I'd say.
And I think that's all we've got time for. I think that's our time. Very sorry for anybody else who wanted to ask a question, but God, you know what women are like once we get to thank you very much for coming along. I thank you very much to my amazing panellists. I think you've done a cracking job. And I believe that we're now going downstairs for a free drink because they're going to announce the winner of the 1,000 Films competition. So thank you very much indeed.